Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave us a comment. We love hearing from you. So today we're going to be unpacking a story that's sending shockwaves through the media world. The Washington Post's decision to not endorse a presidential candidate this year. After nearly 50 years of endorsements, this is a pretty big shift, and trust me, there's more to this story than meets the eye.
What's really interesting is that this wasn't like a simple decision by the paper's editorial board, the people who are usually responsible for making those endorsements. It was actually Jeff Bezos, the owner of the Washington Post, who stepped in and stopped the paper from endorsing Kamala Harris.
Yeah, you heard that right. Bezos himself, the guy who also runs Blue Origin.
Right. And this all happened when Blue Origin was in a pretty heated competition with SpaceX for some huge government contracts.
So that raises a lot of questions, right?
Yeah, definitely. It makes you wonder about Bezos's motivation. Was he worried about upsetting the Trump administration, who would have influence over those contracts? Or was he genuinely concerned about maintaining impartiality and journalistic integrity?
Well, one person who definitely has an opinion on this is Swisher, a former Washington Post reporter. Her wife actually still works there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And she went pretty hard on her podcast, Pivot. Didn't hold back at all on Bezos, Post CEO Will Levis, or the situation as a whole.
What did she say?
She basically questioned the whole idea of journalistic integrity in this situation. Even called Lewis a yes man to Bezos, which, I mean, that's pretty rough.
Yeah, that's a pretty strong statement.
And she knows this world inside and out.
Yeah.
Even pointed out the timing. Suggested that Bezos was more focused on those government contracts for Blue Origin than on the Post's journalistic standards.
And Blue Origin was really lagging behind SpaceX, right?
Oh, yeah. Big time. We're talking billions of dollars in government contracts. So the stakes were incredibly high for Bezos.
That definitely adds another layer to this whole thing. Was it a principled move? Or was it calculated?
It paints a picture of Bezos, this billionaire space entrepreneur pulling strings at a major newspaper to benefit his own company. And you can imagine the fallout from this decision was intense.
People must have been pretty upset.
Oh, yeah. Members of the editorial board, the ones who were supposed to make endorsements, resigned in protest, sent a clear message that they disagreed with the decision and how it was made.
So people were putting their jobs on the line for this?
Absolutely. And then some of the Post's most well-known columnists decided to leave too.
Wow. So it wasn't just an internal issue?
Nope. This was a public exodus, a major blow to any publication, especially one as prestigious as the Washington Post.
What about the readers? Did they stick around?
Reports suggest that over 250,000 subscribers canceled their subscriptions because of this whole situation. And for a newspaper struggling in the digital age, that's a massive financial hit.
Yeah, that's not good. So Bezos's decision didn't just spark ethical debates. It might have hurt the paper financially, too.
It definitely raises questions about the long-term consequences of his actions, both for the Post's reputation and its financial stability.
This whole thing makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About, who controls the news we get and what they want.
Right. It's a little unsettling.
Totally. We depend on these institutions for unbiased information, so we can form our own opinions,
And can form choices.
Exactly. But what if they have their own agendas?
How can we be sure we're getting the whole story?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
It all comes back to media literacy and critical thinking, in the digital age.
So, don't believe everything you read on the internet.
Right. Exactly. It's not just the internet, though. It's newspapers and news channels, too.
The places we've always trusted.
Yep. And it's not just individual owners like Bezos either,
Oh, yeah?
It's advertisers, political affiliations, algorithms that choose what we see online.
It's a lot to keep track of. So what do we do about it? Should we just give up on finding unbiased news?
No, not at all. I mean, awareness is the first step. Once we know the potential problems, we can start navigating this whole information world a little better.
Okay. Yeah.
Diversifying your news sources would be a really good start.
So don't just rely on one place.
Exactly.
See what else is out there.
Right. And when you're looking at different sources, take a minute to see who owns them. Who are the stakeholders? What are they interested in? Knowing that background can really help you see potential biases.
Like doing a background check on your news.
Pretty much. And don't forget about fact-checking.
Oh, right.
If something sounds too good to be true or just crazy, it probably is.
Yeah.
There are a lot of websites that can help you separate the truth from fiction.
Fact-checking, diversifying sources, understanding ownership. It seems like a lot of effort to just read the news.
It is,
Right.
but it's important now more than ever. In this
Yeah.
world of information overload and fake news, critical thinking is super important.
You're telling me this whole Bezos Washington Post thing is a perfect example of why it matters.
Absolutely.
It shows how easy it is for personal interest and journalistic integrity to get mixed up, even at the highest levels. And it started as like an internal media drama,
Right.
but it's become this much bigger conversation.
Exactly. It reminds us that we can't just take things for granted, even from institutions we respect. We have to be careful, question what we read, and look for different perspectives.
Okay, so before we wrap up in part 3 with some final thoughts, let's hear from Bezos himself.
Okay.
He released an op-ed defending his decision.
Oh, interesting.
So let's take a look and see what he has to say. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into this whole Washington Post situation. So we've heard from Swisher, seen the fallout at the paper. What does Bezos have to say for himself?
Well, in his op-ed, Bezos says that his decision wasn't really about any specific candidate. It was more about protecting the idea of media independence, which he thinks is really important for the public to trust the news.
So he's saying endorsements themselves can make it seem like there's bias.
Yeah, even if the reporting is fair. He says that endorsements might make readers wonder if the whole publication is objective, which then makes people trust the news less.
He also claims that endorsements don't actually change voters' minds that much anyway.
Right.
But, I mean, this is Jeff Bezos we're talking about, one of the most powerful people in the world. And he's stepping in to change what a major newspaper does. It's hard to ignore his business interests, right? Especially with those huge contracts for Blue Origin.
I see what you mean. The timing is definitely a little suspicious. And like we said before, Swisher doesn't believe Bezos' explanation, thinks he just nuts to stay on the good side of whoever wins the election.
It comes down to what his real intention was. Was he trying to be ethical and protect journalism? Or was he just trying to protect his business? Tough to know for sure. We all have to decide what we think.
It is complicated. No easy answers. But it makes us think about some hard truths about the media, right? Like a few powerful people owning a lot of it, and how personal interests and journalistic ethics can get mixed up. It's hard to keep the public's trust in the news these days.
So what should our listeners take away from all of this? What should they be thinking about when they read the news?
I think the main thing is we can't just accept everything we read. We have to think critically, question people's motives, consider different viewpoints, and look at different sources for our news.
Be your fact checker.
Exactly. It's more work, but it's really important these days. This whole Bezos Washington Post thing is a good example of why we have to be more media literate. We have to understand how the news gets made and what influences it. It's up to us to be careful and thoughtful about the information we get.
Well said. That was a lot to unpack today. Big thanks to the expert for helping us understand it all. And to you, our awesome listeners, for joining us on this deep dive. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let us know what you think in the comments. We'd love to hear your take on this whole situation. Until next time, stay curious.